Roxo Media House.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the Purple Theory podcast. I have with me, as always, my friend, my co-host, Parker Fleming, and a special guest, noted TCU influencer, Matt Jennings. Matt, welcome to the Purple Theory podcast. How are you doing, bud?
I'm doing great. Thank y'all for having me.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. Matt, you have played a special role in TCU athletics over the last probably 10 years of your life. I don't want to make you give us your CV, but what's been your background at TCU sports coverage?
Sure.
Yeah, Matt, what's your deal? Is what?
Who are you? Who are you?
Absolutely no one of note, really ever, but certainly not now. I graduated from TCU in 2016. I was sports editor for 360 for a spell. Covered TCU for Rivals, covered TCU and the Big 12 at large for diehards.com. Rest in peace. Worked with Grant there, and went back, did a little more coverage at Rivals there, and then now, just lately, just kind of tweet snarky things and write the occasional blog post on Medium.com that nobody reads, and that's fine. So that's great. So it's a nice low stakes existence that I've kind of carved out for myself.
It truly is freeing to be just a person on the internet. I totally understand that. And Matt, we're glad to have you here. I'm sure, between the mentions and the DMs, between Grant and I probably talk to you about most of the TCU stuff we talk about on this podcast anyway. So glad to have you back. And I will shout out, the last time we had you on, I think was 2020. When I think things started to get bad, like capital B bad off field. And I only really remember this podcast well because I was a novice in terms of how we deal with audio, and I was under a blanket. I was trying to record and like dampen, and you and Grant just ruthlessly made fun of me for being in the dark under a blanket.
Yeah, I vaguely remember this. I remember
2020 feels like 9 lives ago, but yeah.
Yes. And we were, the other thing that I remember about that podcast was you specifically asking me on air, like, oh, are you going to write your season preview this year? And I was like, no, I don't have time for that. And then you can, shout out to Parker for making me think about it. I was like, maybe I do want to do that this year. And so then I rushed to finish it before the season started. And I was like, well, I made Parker a liar, but but here it is.
Hey man, bullying works. That's all I have to say.
Yeah.
Bullying is bad, and you shouldn't do it, except when you're doing it on the internet to accomplish things that you want to happen.
You would know that better than anyone, Matt. Yeah, I remember that podcast as well because I tweeted a screenshot of Parker under a blanket, and he texted me and said, "Please delete this." And I was like, "Okay."
You didn't tweet a screenshot of me under a blanket. What happened was I was sitting on my floor with a blanket over my head and had a beer in my hand. And what I did to move my computer was put my beer in my mouth and bite down on the edges. And you took a screenshot of me with a Coors Light shoved halfway down my throat and posted it on the internet. So we'll talk about that off air.
Neither here nor there.
That's not a paid product placement. That's not a sponsor.
I don't know.
We give them free advertising because Max Duggan gives them free advertising. We try to be consistent with what Max wants. So we're just falling in line there. Grant, what are we doing? Why do we have Matt on the podcast? There's no game this weekend. Why are we podcasting at all?
We are talking to Matt because Matt, I think, is one of the more sound and reasonable voices in the TCU, and I hate this term, Twitter sphere. So I'd like to get a reasonable opinion, maybe to bring me down to earth, maybe to bring our listeners down to earth, or maybe just to confirm our biases. Matt, this is a very generic question. You can take it in whatever direction you want. What is your opinion of the TCU football season this year?
How much time do you have?
No, as much as you want.
It's
like an hour to 45 minutes, whatever.
Yeah,
that sounds great. my opinion is that, and I think this is an opinion that's shared by a lot of folks. I think TCU has had a phenomenal season, one that is like far, far beyond anything that you could have reasonably expected. I think they've overachieved a lot. But I think they have also capitalized on a lot of untapped potential that y'all, I know, have been pining to see come to fruition for the last 2-3 years. And so I'm very high on this team. I think they have improved a ton over the course of the year, which I think is something that I kind of take for granted or don't even think about really over when it comes to college football. I make them, I think an instinct of mine that is wrong, that I need to correct for, is that I kind of think that kind of what you are at the start of the season, it kind of is. I don't allow for as much variance or much change as you would with a sport like maybe like Major League Baseball or the NBA, where like there's a much larger sample size. I think I underestimate like how much a team can change or improve over the course of a college football season. And this team, I will say that, has grown and improved, even if like the margins at the earlier part of the season, especially against like Oklahoma and stuff, like probably look more impressive. But I think the team has become far more complete and has been tested in much more significant ways in the back part of the season, and I don't think you can throw that away. So I'm very impressed by the team. I'm very impressed by what Sonny Dykes has done in year one. I think there's, just like anything, there's a whole bunch of circumstances that came together to make all this possible. I don't, you play the season out 100 times. I'm not sure how many times you end up with, a spot in the Big 12 title game, a spot in the playoff. But they've taken advantage of every single opportunity, and it's been the most fun I've had in a college football and a TCU football season, with the exception of 2014. And now they're in the playoffs, so pending what happens next, maybe that gets amended soon.
I'm amazed you got through that. Sorry, I was just a joke. I'm amazed you got through that without saying the name Max Duggan. But go ahead, Parker.
Yeah,
Max has been so good. It's been so good.
We'll get to that. We'll get to that.
What have we been saying for like 4 years at this point now? It's just hey man, he's a 4-star recruit. He's very talented. Just set up an offense for him and he's going to do fine. Like, that's all we said.
I'll say this to give y'all your flowers. I'm in a group text with Grant and some other folks that we used to work with the Diehards, and we have poked fun at Grant for a while. Or had, past tense, poked fun at Grant for a while for the Max Duggan, love the Max Duggan man crush. And, in context at the time, I felt justified in those opinions, and I feel like they were right. But I think I undersold what y'all were saying, which was that in the right situation, his ceiling was higher than we probably expected, and that was absolutely true. I came into the season very much thinking that Chandler Morris was the guy and that he was the right fit. And obviously, like, with no way of knowing how things would have turned out if Chandler Morris had stayed healthy, but Duggan has been incredible this season. Another instance of like seeing growth and development even over the course of the season has been really, really cool to see. Sorry, Parker, you continue on your point though on this.
I've never been wrong about anything,
laps.
And I appreciate you being here for this. And I've said this before, and I've said it again. Grant, I am working. I've talked to someone who has done something like this before. We're going to do the hate and ass retrospective. We're going to do the victory lap. This is not that, but we will do that we will do that non-recorded, and everyone will enjoy it, and we'll let people be on there, and that'll be great. But Max has been great. Like, Matt, when they ran against Iowa State, 4th down, first drive, they ran like the play action pop pass. That was a touchdown. I was just like, this is everything I've been saying for the last 4 years. Like, all we had to do was this. I want to talk about, because again, I don't want to get too deep in this because I don't think it's productive for any of us, but like, Matt, I think you and I particularly had some very intimate windows into the Gary Patterson experience. What is Sonny Dykes, in your opinion? Because Grant and I have pontificated on this a lot. What has Sonny Dykes done in your experience, that has just been better for this team than where it was the last couple of years?
Yeah, I think another answer where it's like, how much time do you have? I think the things that stood out to me before the season, and I think these have remained true. The things that are the most different are the offensive just philosophy, right? And flexibility. It's not even that he's married to a particular philosophy. I don't think the offense that they're running this year is the offense that they necessarily even expected that they would be running this year, right? And I would say that that's the biggest thing is the willingness to be flexible when it comes to the offense. I think people expected that Sonny Dykes, being, on one of the, primary branches of the air raid tree, thought it was going to be more, 50 passes a game, kind of, dink and dunk down the field all the time kind of thing. And to his credit, and I think this is what all the best kind of air raid adjacent coaches have done. This is what Lincoln has done. This is what Sonny has done. This is what the Bryles tree is, a very strange offshoot of the Leach Mummy tree, but it is part of it. They have iterated on and created variations on that that kind of base offense, right? And I think that's what Sonny has done this week. He's already done it in the past, but he especially done it this year. Like a willingness to be like, the vertical passing game that they have is not always something that's a staple of like a Mike Leach offense, right? But they're taking advantage of the personnel that they have. All the gap runs that they're doing, as opposed to a lot of air raid schemes, are very just inside outside zone heavy. All the gap running schemes that they're running, in addition to those, is stuff that's not always present in that kind of offense. Their just willingness to lean on the run game is something that's not super present.
Which is important to note. I'm just only going in for like the lowest common denominator of the person who's listening to this podcast for the first time. TCU heretofore has been, we're just going to run inside zone when we have numbers. We're going to run inside zone when we feel like we don't have a passing advantage, and we're not going to do anything innovative in the run game at all. And that's kind of the new generation of the air raid that Garrett Riley has drawn on and done this. That's so refreshing this season, in my opinion, is just like, hey, not only are we not going to limit ourselves to one kind of run concept, but also we're not going to limit ourselves to one kind of run philosophy either. There's just been so much diversity, and Kendre Miller's done a great job kind of being able to thrive in all of those different situations.
Absolutely. And I think it's helped him. It's helped Amari DiMercato have a super senior year renaissance, right? It's helped Max Duggan. It's helped the whole offense. The fact that Riley and Dykes have that flexibility has been huge. I was listening to an interview that Sonny had. I think it was on Mike Golick Jr.'s podcast, and he was talking about coming in to the program and what were the things that they like. What were the things they were changing? What were the things that they felt like were strengths of the team? Yada yada. And he was talking about we came in and we realized that this was a team that had a real toughness and physicality to it, and we didn't want to lose that. So they practice in certain ways or have schemed the offense in certain ways to try and maintain that. Whereas if it was something that maybe Sonny had built from the ground up, that personality may not have been there. That kind of play calling may not have been there. And so that's what I'm talking about, like this willingness to recognize what's the personnel that I have, what's advantageous to me, and let me lean into that rather than saying, well, this is just what I believe is best, and I'm going to do, square peg round hole kind of thing. So I think that's the thing. It's just the willingness to try out new things, be flexible when it comes to the offense. I'm curious to see 2-3 years down the road what this scheme looks like, if it takes on a totally different personality once he starts getting a chance to get quote unquote his athletes in the door, what it looks like. But that flexibility is the thing that stands out to me the most, at least when especially I should say, in contrast with the previous regime. Like Gary had he had like a 2-year stretch in 2014, 2015, where he was like, I'm going to try something totally different. And I guess 3 years. And then once we got to 2016, you and I talked about this with y'all when I was on here last time. They got to 2016. And as soon as that philosophy that he was trying something new with started backfiring on him, he hard pivot into what he was comfortable with. Right. And so like that really like clinging firmly to just what you feel like is best for you or the way you want to play the game. That's not there right now. And that's, I think, the biggest thing. There's other stuff, ancillary stuff when it comes to branding, when it comes to just openness, which is all stuff that's nice to me that I like, but maybe not quite as maybe not quite as like of a root cause of like what we're seeing right now. It's fun.
It's fun, and it's not a root cause, but that's kind of my question for I guess both of y'all is, y'all have been around this program for a long time. Parker, you were here, I don't know, in 1980 or whenever you were here, but y'all have been around for a long portion of the Gary era. You've been familiar with him. This program seems to be a lot more open. It seems that the vibes have really changed around this program. And God, I know I hate that term, talking about vibes changing, but it does seem that there is a different atmosphere around this program. So Matt and Parker both, I mean, it's tangibly different, right? Like, I'm not just making that up. Like, it is a different aura, correct?
I think that I made this claim on Twitter and I stand by it. I think that like one of the large reasons that Trevon Boykin wasn't invited to the Heisman ceremony in 2014 was TCU's willful aversion to media access. And I think I also made this point that, you know, like Texas Tech this summer got so much good press because Joey McGuire just said, hey, show up and I'll walk you around and you can write an article about me. And TCU has never done that ever. And Sonny Dykes knows how to navigate that well. Like the fact that Sonny Dykes went on that Barstool podcast for 45 minutes and told stories about him and Dana Holgerson going and getting drunk. Like, I can't even fathom that from a TCU coach. And just generally the media environment has been so different. And just saying like, hey, we're going to celebrate our guys is something that TCU has never done, like even the bare minimum. And I think that has a lot to do with why Max is on a national stage, why Riley is winning awards, why Dykes is winning awards. It's just because TCU says, look, a lot of these awards are not just based on how well you played, but also on who noticed. And they've done a really lot. They've done a lot there to really make that count, which they have not done in past seasons.
I would agree, and I would add to that. It gives you, I don't know, I feel like at least it gives you more margin for error. It gives you more leeway, right? When the last few years, Gary coasted for a while on the goodwill that he built up during the Rose Bowl and the Peach Bowl seasons, right? Because everyone was just like, look at this, like beautiful, like little school that could kind of story, right? And then, but then, you know, you keep and so that gave him the goodwill and the cachet, I think, for like nobody to really question as TCU's winning 5 games, 6 games, not really capitalizing on the opportunities that it had in the Big 12. But then you have some off-field, let's call them unforced errors, and you have some just weird either like staffing choices, or you have game management decisions that don't go well. You don't get as much benefit of the doubt if you don't have a positive relationship with the media. So it's just like, it's a utilitarian thing, if nothing else, from Sonny Dykes of realizing like, it's going to benefit me if I let these folks do, you know, just have, you know, throw a bone to the local and the national media, and give them what they want. Gary had his reasons for not doing that. Gary, because he chose to act this way, he chose to read absolutely everything of the coverage of his upcoming opponents. He chose to watch everything. He had people, you know, watching whatever behind the scenes footage of other people's practices that other teams put out. And so he viewed that as an advantage for him. And so he chose to not, he believed he would be wrong to give that advantage to anybody else, which that was his prerogative. I would argue,
if I'm telling you, I'm telling Iowa State.
Correct. Mm-hmm. Exactly. The old adage, right? I would gently say that this has been the most open and the most accessible that TCU has ever been. I don't think it's really affected I don't think anybody's garnered anything of note that they have been able to turn into a winning advantage against TCU this season, right? I mean, the fact that like, this is just a small one, like from the playoff, the team's reactions to the playoff rankings getting released on Sunday. They did a cut up of everybody afterwards, and they openly showed Darius Davis like in like a wrist or hand kind of cast, like as he's like reacting to the thing. And I'm like, that never would have like flown with under Gary. It just wouldn't have ever happened. Or like, all the Carter Boys stuff, you can see the people who are in red jerseys at practice, right? Like that just never would have happened. But it's a trade-off because you get to create this energy and this excitement around the fan base where you have sellouts every game. It also helps when you win. That's the big thing when it comes to attendance. But you have all this fan attention. You have all this fan engagement on social media. You have people coming to write glowing profiles of Sonny. He gets to go on podcasts with Mike Golick or with Big Cat and PFT and the whole thing. And and then the goal that Sonny, I think, ultimately has there is we turn this attention into drawing the eyes of better players, getting more traction in the NIL space, and with the goal of parlaying that into better teams and better players down the road, right? Like it's all has a purpose. It's not just like, well, this is nice.
Yeah. Well, and that's like, you make a great point, Matt. Like I've thought a lot about this. There's a Grantland article, RP Grantland, from 2015 written by Chris B. Brown, who wrote, Smart Football, great author, buys books, yada, 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 about Gary Patterson's defense. It's, I think, the one article that TCU allowed in probably 3 years that was an in-depth dive into what Gary wanted to do on defense. Whereas you look now, Richard Johnson, friend of the podcast, who's been on before and has written, he was at the Big 12 championship game, wrote about Max Duggan, and was in the room when TCU found out they were going to the playoff. They're so much more open. They're so much more media friendly. You're right. It doesn't affect the on-field performance, but it affects the national perception of TCU. And I don't know if it affects the voters. I don't know if it affects pollsters, whatever, but it does make an impact in terms of the national perception of the Horned Frogs. And so I just think that's really important. Matt, I do want to delve down a little bit into more specifics. We've talked about Max. We could talk about Max for hours. And please call me and we'll talk about Max for hours. On this offense, Quentin Johnston's obviously the star. Kendra Miller's been fantastic. But who are kind of the hidden guys? Who are kind of the guys that have surprised you this season that you didn't expect would play such an impact going into this year?
There's a few of them. I think Amari is one of them. I think Amari DiMercato. Grant, you remember me, texting you last year about just like in a rage about the fact of like Amari DiMercato like getting meaningful snaps in games over Kendra Miller or over
he's
Zach
like
Evans,
Beetlejuice. Right? If you say his name 3 times and say, what the hell is he doing out there? Then he runs for a touchdown. It is so funny. Like the group text we have with like, it's like Grant, Melissa, and Jamie and Colin or whatever. It's like, you could set your watch to us being like, why is Amari getting a touch here? And then him scoring a touchdown. Like it's immediately after someone says that. Yeah.
And that's the thing is like, he got the touchdown in the Colorado game. It was like, oh, okay, that's nice. That's cool. Whatever. And then like, he keeps doing it. Like he had a key touchdown against Texas Tech. He helped run down the clock and also like bulldoze somebody against Texas. He's like getting like meaningful yards, meaningful first downs, meaningful touchdowns. And had what would have been the game tying score against Baylor. Now then he drops the 2-pointer on the next play. But he's a better receiver on the whole than Kendre at least as of this moment, right? So just like, and it's just so weird to see a guy he's a 5th or 6th year senior at this point make that sort of jump, right? And so that would be one that I would point to. The other one I would point to is Darius Davis, honestly, because Davis last year it was just like he had some nice plays, but on the whole, like, with the exception of like the return game on offense, like it seemed like he couldn't get out of his own way when it came to like just like really having trouble with like ball security or just like ball handling on like those sweeps or dropped passes and stuff. And he's made some clutch catches. He's made difficult catches. He has been able to get the ball in space and just like burn people in multiple instances this year, stuff that they just like really had trouble doing in years past. And he's played his way probably into being an NFL draft pick, if as a return specialist, if nothing else. Which is, so again, just really, really cool. Not something that I was expecting. The other one, even in season, I think the one that surprised me the most, because early on in the season I was like, oh, okay, he's done. Ja'Cory Spivey.
Hell yeah, man.
The season had a couple drops, and I was like, oh, okay, he's kind of like, he might have played his way out of his playing time, and now he's become like one of Max's like go-to targets on third down, where he makes a catch between three guys and gets like bulldozed on like 3rd and 4 on a regular basis, and he makes the catch like every time. Really, really cool. And so again, another instance of that growth in the development over the course of the season. I think you're right, Grant, like having guys like Quentin, Kendre, or Max and these big, the big names who draw the attention. But if you're going to make a run like they've been making, you need your role players to step up in a big way too. And they have had that at every turn to this point this season, which is so fun.
Yeah, it's very fun. Man, I don't mean this to be a leading question. I'm asking it
no, please
as a. No. Have you noticed how important it is to have a offensive line coach?
A good offensive line coach, yeah,
or an offensive line coach at all, yeah.
It's been really. I think there are legitimate criticisms to make of the offensive line at times this year, particularly on the edges,
Sure.
as y'all have waxed poetic about to this point. But it's night and day from last season. It really, really is. The amount of time that Max Duggan has in the pocket, the amount of space that they're creating in the run game, and
I think run blocking specifically. Yeah,
I think the thing that I never would have ever pegged this team doing is they remind me, stay with me here for a second. This is going to be a niche reference that maybe is only rings true for me. They remind me of like the 2008 to 2010-ish Atlanta Falcons in this, that that era of the Mike Smith Atlanta Falcons loved to do.
Is this Steven Jackson era? Who
no, it was Michael Turner era.
God.
They would lean on you for 4 quarters, and then suddenly Michael Turner was bulldozing people and breaking off these long runs in the 4th quarter. And that's what they're able to do with an offensive line that last year I think everyone would have said, we joked about it preseason. I was reading somebody's preseason preview for this year and they were talking about the offensive line being a position group of strength for TCU coming into the season. And I was like, okay. And that felt very much like that was what the coaching staff was kind of like crafting the narrative going into the season. I felt like I read that in a few different places, but to their credit, they have largely been right, because they have been able to wear down other teams, get those body blows in over the course of 3 quarters where, and then it pays off in the 4th quarter where they're able to start breaking off big runs. They're able to, either churn out the clock in a 4-minute drill if they need to, or, Kendre Miller breaking off a 70-yarder against Texas when they desperately need that as well, especially if the passing game's not going right. So the first game where they really weren't able to do that was Saturday against Kansas State, because Kansas State was the first team that was really able to kind of control the line of scrimmage against them like all year, which is wild to think about. So yeah, shout out to AJ Ricker. Shout out to the whole offensive line group. I think they've been really, really stunningly better than they were a year ago.
4 out of 5 of them have been consistent, productive college football offensive linemen, and one of them at times has been okay, which I'm very comfortable at saying. Well, I think about Matt too, just stuff. I mean, Grant's also here, so I could say I think about Matt and Grant. Like the knock on Spivey last year was just like he just doesn't know the plays and just like can't get involved in the offense because they don't trust him to run the plays. And clearly there was some kind of install issue there. You think about Jared Wiley coming in and his skill set that's so diverse. Grant and I have talked a lot about how it felt like we had so many capital G games this year where it was the Darius Davis game, the Quentin Johnston game, the Jared Wiley game, the Kendre Miller game. And just that's never been true of TCU before. Like, think about 2021, we ran the ball or passed the ball 11 times against Texas Tech in a 52-point win, like a 52-point game where we won by 20 something. Or like Kansas in 2020, where, you know, Carter Ware caught a touchdown, and God love him, Carter Ware's one of our friends and a guy we really like, but like very much not a receiver. And just how crazy and disjointed and honestly desperate the team seemed, where it was like, we don't know how to score, so we're going to do everything possible to minimize variance and get the desired outcome, and that's going to leave you coming up short. And this year there's just this like hunger and defiance in TCU scoring, which has been so refreshing. Just every week for me, just I'm like, every week anew, I'm just taken aback by TCU saying, oh, actually our plan is to score more points than the other team, and that's how we're going to win, which has just not been what TCU has done.
Not only score more points, but score more than just one more point. They have won games by one. Have they had games where they scored one? They've definitely have had at least one game where they won by 2. But yes, they were like, we don't need to just get by. We don't need to just do the minimum. To your point,
if TCU had played win by 1 this season, they would be a 7-5 team. I'm very comfortable saying that.
Maybe.
Yeah. Best case scenario. Okay, we've talked about offense a lot. We're not going to let Grant talk about Bud Clark Island because he's tweeted about that too much already. And so we're going to put Bud Clark off the table. I'm going to claim Josh Newton as someone who entirely surprised me, as in someone whose name I didn't know before like the 3rd game of the season. And not to toot our own horns, but like, Grant and I do pretty in-depth previews. We talk to people who are at camp and everything, and this was just not on our radar at all. No. Josh Newton being an all-conference cornerback there and just being really, really great. Matt, defensively, guys that surprised you, even if you want to go philosophy first and then we can go guys after that. On the defensive side of the ball, huge shift from the Gary Patterson defense, not just from the 4-down to the 3-down front, but the principles and the tenets and the implementation. There's no more yelling and screaming and sweating on the sidelines trying to get the play call in at the very last minute. What are your thoughts on the defensive vibes, on players who made the most impact here?
Yeah, I think I wrote about this in my preview at the beginning, before the beginning of the year. There are some common threads between what Gillespie does and what Patterson does, but it was always going to be a big shift. Both because, you know, teams, you know, it's like players, it's like being asked to write with your, you know, you're right-handed, you write with your right hand forever. And then suddenly someone new comes in and says like, hey, you have to do all your work with your left hand. Right. And that was what I was kind of viewing this transition to a brand new defensive, not just primary, like base personnel package, but like scheme on the whole. Is going to be uncomfortable, and there's going to be some growing pains, and it's going to take a while to get comfortable and good at it, right? And I think again we've seen that growth and development in season, which was not necessarily something that I expected to see. I thought like we got 4 games in, and I was like, okay, this is what they are on defense. They're going to just get by, and they've had games where the defense has kept them in games or just flat out won the game for them, right? Like, against Iowa State, against Texas, to some degree against Texas Tech, like the defense won those games on some level, right? Yep. And so that was not something that I ever expected to see this season. Newton was one that I was like, I frankly am a big fan of Keon Stewart. I think we're all of the opinion that like Noah Daniels has shown flashes at times, whatever.
Keon Stewart is like the hot girl in middle school where I didn't know her and I didn't love her, but I love the idea of her.
Where are we going with this?
The Purple Theory podcast.
That's a quote. Look, all right. I can't be responsible if you guys don't know The Office deep enough to understand why that's
okay.
funny.
All right. I just wanted to make sure
that
was just wanted to make sure
that was above board. That was above board.
Oh man. But
that was above board. He yelled as HR dragged him kicking and screaming out of the office.
come on, Parker. We talked about this for like a half hour. The Newton, again, another player where it was like early on in the season, I was like, this might be a little rough. And it was because of the whole, I think Newton was suffering from like Kevin White syndrome of like,
Yeah.
teams are going to throw away from the name that they know, from the corner that they know. And so he was getting a ton of targets early on. And especially Oklahoma State was the game that I think of in particular, where it was like, oh, like this isn't like, we might have a problem here. And he has grown and developed and gotten better as he's been forced to face a really like high volume of passes. And he's gotten way better over the course of the season. It's been really spectacular, honestly. And okay, hold on here for a second, because I'm gonna hold y'all's feet to the fire on something that you said like 3 months ago. Y'all were trying to tell us.
I assure you, we don't remember it, but
y'all were trying to tell folks. I don't remember after which game. It might have been the SMU game. Y'all were trying to tell folks. Y'all were trying to sit here and say, "Do we know that Trey Tomlinson is good?" I think we can.
That was Parker. That was Parker.
Tomlinson is good. Okay, because I was sitting here saying, I was like, okay, both like through non-conference, like I don't know why him and Quentin Johnston were like having like mirror experiences. I feel like in non-conference where it was like defenses were tilting their whole coverage to Quentin Johnston, and offenses were trying to test Trey Tomlinson in that same stretch. And so like Quentin Johnston was not being productive, and Trey Tomlinson was getting attacked a bunch of times. And it was a very weird experience where we're like, are either of these players any good? And then we got into the heat of conference play. We're like, oh, they're both actually very, very good. So that was a fun and vindicating thing for me, because I was sitting here, I was like, no, okay, like stop it.
No,
okay,
hold
I
on,
actually
Parker.
agree. I actually agree with your assessment. And here's what I would say is last year, TCU left him out to dry because TCU could not let CJ Caesar be by himself on an island without a safety over there. And like, what I keep wanting to say Blaine Gabbert, and that's not it. Chase freaking Garbers absolutely destroyed. Best game of Chase Garber's entire life against TCU's defense there, because they left THG on an island and he didn't know how to respond to it. And all last season, he was absolutely drowning. And he compounded it by making more mistakes. I thought the SMU game this year, similar thing, because Gillespie didn't know he could trust Newton like he could. And so absolutely still, he's on an island and made some dumb penalties against Rashee Rice. And there was a moment there where it was just like, hey, if he's going to be asked to be the number one guy and he can't do it, we've got to talk about that. And I think that one, I probably overstated that. Totally fine. I've been wrong about a lot of things and we'll be wrong again. But I will say that I think Gillespie just got a better feel on his defense as the season went along and was able to say, oh, I know how to kind of move around a little bit to make this better for everyone. And both of them thrived in that. So I absolutely agree that in the long scope of history, that was probably premature and didn't take into account the adjustments that Gillespie was going to make.
Well, so here's the deal, Matt. Parker and I have talked a lot about the adjustments Joe Gillespie makes at halftime. What's been your opinion on sort of how he's managed games from, TCU kind of sucking in the first half in a lot of instances, and then kind of picking up on the back end? But football as well as we do. What have you kind of seen out of Gillespie?
Yeah, I think the big thing coming into the year was, again, talking about like the contrast and the similarities between what he does and what Gary does. Similarity is like, and this isn't unique to Gillespie, a lot of teams do what you would call like pattern matching coverages, right? Where it, depending on where the receiver breaks off their route, the defensive back's like coverage assignment is different, right? And so like that's something that was a common thread between. So like that was something that was probably easy for the secondary to kind of bring over from the next. Maybe the assignments are a little different, or the coverages that they do all the time are a little bit different, but like that's a common thread. But the thing that was really different from them, from Gary to Gillespie, was Gary's was very much, we're going to attack the gaps. We're going to try and he built, going back even to the Rose Bowl. This is something that I think Kirk talked about on the Rose Bowl podcast against Wisconsin, like the idea of like, if you've got a size disadvantage, using speed to counter that. And they would try to shoot through gaps to create negative plays in the run game. It was all about, we're not going to be passive. We're not going to we're going to dictate to you how this play is going to go, and we're going to try and fire through gaps and create no gain or negative plays all the time. And Gillespie's not doing that. Gillespie is the spill and kill thing, where it's like, we're going to hold our ground against the offensive line. We're not going to shoot through the gaps, but we're going to occupy every single gap to where you have to go to the outside. And I think that was a philosophical shift that the defense had to get used to, particularly the linebackers and the safeties. Okay, maybe not so much the safeties because Mark Perry was not here last year, but certainly for the linebackers. So it's different life, right? And so I think they've, again, example of just development over the course of the season. So I think that's the thing that I think they've grown in a lot over the course of the season. Like if you would have told me before the year that they were going to be able to hold Bijan Robinson to 29 yards in a game, incredible. Now that's a game management
TCU was going to do better than
too.
Alabama against Bijan. Yes, absolutely.
That's a game management and personnel decision failure on Sark's part, which as a Falcons fan, we can talk about that. But on the whole, like I think they've grown a lot in their run defense over the course of the season. To actually get back to your original question, like the in-game adjustments thing, I think is interesting. I think I kind of posed this on the Twitter space that I was on with y'all or with Parker a few weeks ago. I do wonder if teams are kind of throwing like everything in the kitchen sink into like their opening script or their game plan for TCU, because it is probably one of their 1 or 2 top 10 matchups of the year, right? And so you have teams like throwing weird stuff at the wall that they hadn't shown on film before, and so then TCU has to react to that in real time, in game, get into the locker room at half, kind of collect themselves, see what the offense is doing, and then create a game plan to respond to it. And they come out in the second half and they're able to kind of tamp down a little bit. That's my gut of what's kind of happened a few instances. I think the Baylor game is a really good example of that, where it's like Jeff Grimes was like, and God love him, was doing the most against TCU, right? Like I can't get the what was it? The 2 pulling linemen who take 2 steps one way and like did a pirouette and went the other way. I can't get that move out of my mind. I've never seen a team do that. And like, that's my point.
It was beautiful. Like, it was graceful. And really, the fact
really
that they were able, like, I understand why they lost to Kansas State 31-3 the week before TCU, because they were putting that shit in. Like they were doing all of that.
Right. And so the idea that I think that I would need to go back and watch film more closely once we get done the season and see what teams were doing. Because I only really get a chance to watch teams closely when they play TCU. And so I can't compare in season what they're doing at TCU versus what they do all the time. But that's my gut instinct, is that teams are like, let's throw them a bunch of things that they haven't seen before and try and get out to a lead, which has happened a few different times. And then the defense makes their adjustments and is able to kind of limit the bleeding in the second half. And then the offense obviously like hits a couple explosive plays, and then it ends up being, a TCU win in so many instances this season, right? And so I think that's a credit to Gillespie that the wheels don't come off when they face that early onslaught, and that they're able to make those adjustments in game. Impressive. I'm going to finish a sentence here, I promise. With both Sonny and with Joe Gillespie, I'm really interested to see what the team looks like in like 2 years, because obviously they have their ideas of what they'd like to do on both sides of the ball, and they're making the best of a situation with a roster that they did not pick, and with a roster of players that maybe don't fit exactly what they want to do, right? And so I'm curious to see, once they kind of, this is true of every coach, but once they get kind of their guys in, but like really, like once you get a personnel grouping of linebackers and defensive linemen that run the 3-3-5, Gillespie's 3-3-5, the way you want, what does that look like? And what's the ceiling on that? And maybe it's worse. I don't know. Maybe it doesn't work out. But I think the early returns on, again, that flexibility and being able to adapt to the situation that you were given is a mark in his favor. Very impressed by what I've seen thus far. Especially when, you have a real monumental legacy to try and follow up. I think it helps that TCU's defense cratered so much last year. Like the expectations were really low coming into this year. I think it would have been much harder.
It could not have gotten worse.
That's the thing.
No.
That the only time that we've gone against y'all's like very common adage of it can always get worse. It literally could.
It literally could not have gotten worse
this year, and so I think he was benefited from that. But
so here's the thing, Matt. You talk about 2 years from now. Personally, as I sit here on Wednesday, December the 7th, I couldn't care less about 2 years from now. I want to talk about I want to talk about New Year's Eve. I want to talk about TCU versus Michigan for a minute. And I'll be honest with you, Matt. You probably know a lot more about this game than I do. Parker, I don't know about you. I don't want to do a preview at all. I want to talk about vibes.
I'm not even looking at my numbers. I ran them today, but I'm never going to look at them. Yep.
I looked at them and it made me sad. I want to talk about emotions. Matt, what are your emotions going into TCU versus Michigan, the 2-3 playoff seed to play for the national damn championship game?
I'm Lord. Oh Lord. I'm just like I'm floored as we talked about. I'm floored that they're in the situation. As I've said this a bunch of times over the course of the season, like everything going forward is gravy. Like once they got to like 8 wins, everything beyond that, gravy, right? It's all extra, right? Sorry. And so they could come out and get the doors blown off them. And honestly, like I think that would be fine for 2 reasons. One, because they've already achieved far more than what you would have expected. And 2, they blowouts in the playoff semifinals are very common. So I don't think it would be an indictment of TCU, talk about Ohio State or Clemson or Notre Dame or Alabama, honestly. All sorts of teams that have lost by multiple possessions in semifinal games. And no one impugns the quality of those programs or condescends to those programs about that afterwards, right? And say that they didn't actually deserve to be there. And so that could happen. And I think not sure if I say it's a likelihood, but I think it's a possibility, and I'm not going to be sad about it. Like it has been an amazing ride. I will say, I think that TCU, like in terms of vibes, like, I don't know, I'm talking myself into TCU doing what they've done all season against this Michigan team and like getting themselves like just being in position in the fourth quarter. And like, I like TCU's chances. I'm not picking them to win necessarily, but I like TCU's chances. If you're in a 10-point game in the fourth quarter, I just like this TCU team's ability to navigate that situation because they've done it.
How many? Okay,
hell yeah, brother.
Let me just ask a real question. Let's just get very real for a second. How many college football teams right now have a better option than Max Duggan throws it to Quentin Johnston?
Like, very few.
Few. Yeah.
Like Ohio State.
That's embedded to Brock. What's his name? But
Brock Bowers.
Brock Bowers. Yeah.
100%. And I do think this. And the other thing we're talking about vibes. This was the matchup that I would have preferred.
For sure.
My fear heading into Sunday was obviously possibly dropping to 5 and then putting Alabama in at 4. I thought that was absolutely a possibility. My other fear was them dropping.
Sorry, you weren't moved by Nick Saban's Saturday night presidential address where he appealed to Vegas to fix his problems?
I wasn't moved by it, but I thought that there would be people who made decisions.
I was very worried.
Right?
I was worried.
And so that was my biggest fear. My second biggest fear was dropping to 4 and having to play a Georgia team that has put teams through the wood chipper all year, right? The matchup that you wanted of the options, right? I think of the options that were available to you was to play Michigan, not because Michigan's a bad team. Michigan's a phenomenal team. But in terms of matchups wise, Michigan, I don't think is going to is not as capable of boat racing you as Georgia is, right? Because they're just, at least until the last couple of weeks, have not shown the ability to just like light a fire on the offensive side of the ball, right? And so that's the thing that I think makes me feel better about this game. If you end up in a game where it's like in the low 20s in the fourth quarter, Cool. Like then you're in striking distance. I'm could they
Are
end up in a situation where it's like it's 21-0 at like midway through the second, 100%.
sure.
But that would not be a typical thing from this Michigan team.
Yeah, our former coworker Shehan Jayaraja, now of CBS Sports, made the point that TCU is basically.
Boo.
Ah,
I
boo.
heard he was going to boo at your funeral.
He will.
I heard.
That's a joke. I will outlive Shehan if it's the last thing I do. He made the point that basically TCU is Purdue if Purdue was 10 times better at everything. And so I kind of like TCU's chances against Michigan. Matt, we have to get you out on one thing, and we're going to do a roundtable on this. Every guest we have on this podcast, we ask them to say one nice thing about Max Duggan. and this is the first time that we have recorded since Max Duggan has been named a Heisman finalist. I'll go first. Matt, you can go, and Parker, you can close us out here. The video that TCU posted, it was perfect, I think was the caption, where it was the slow-mo of Max running down the sideline, diving into the end zone, set to Billy Bob Thornton as Gary Gaines' speech during Friday Night Lights. Made me feel things I've never really felt before.
Actual tears.
Actual tears. I had dinner with my mom last night, who is not a football person, does not listen to this podcast, God bless her. And even she was like, I've never liked a college athlete more than I've liked Max Duggan. All I have to say is that we were right. I feel like my kid is graduating college. I'm getting teared up talking about it now. I am just so happy for this freaking kid. Matt, please stop me from crying on the podcast.
No, please cry on the podcast. I joke, I have always been like an easy mark for things that are supposed to make you cry. Like I am 100% the person in the audience of whether it's watching a movie or a TV show, like the moment that's supposed to make you cry is going to make me cry, right? And that has become exponentially more the case since I've had children, right? It's just you become
humble
a big,
brag.
You become a big softy, right? And so 100%. So yeah, like the Friday Night Lights video like killed me. Like I am like again, actual tears. It is saying nice things about Max Duggan. I'm becoming a broken record as I say this, but I'm floored by the amount of growth and development that I've seen from him. The things that I've seen him do this year that I thought would never be reality with him. The ability to the improvements in his accuracy, the ability to throw the ball downfield vertically with accuracy, with touch, things that I never thought I'd see him do. The ability
into freaking, I'm so glad that I said frickin'. I'm glad I censored myself. Into windows. That has never happened. Into tight windows.
Into tight windows, making like really smart decisions. He's got, I guess with the one on Saturday, is it 3 interceptions or 4 interceptions on the season, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like a total that I never thought he would hit unless he was throwing like 10 passes a game, right?
Yep.
Never thought he would be able to, with the volume that he's throwing, limit the turnover-worthy plays the way that he has this season. Making good decisions with the ball, but also still being able to be explosive. I will say the thing about Saturday and the thing about that video that it reawakened something. He's been this new version of himself all year. Saturday against Kansas State was like vintage Max Duggan. It was like a way of him playing that we haven't seen him play, and I think that's by design. I think they've they wanted to keep him healthy for a full season, and so they're like, we're asking you to stay in the pocket more. We don't want you to scramble as much. We're not going to run design quarterback runs or option plays as much because we just want to keep you healthy for the duration of the season. But when the chips were down in a key moment, he willed the team into a tie and into overtime with what he has always been really good at, which is finding a way on the ground. And that was really cool to see. It kind of unlocked something about the offense that I don't think Kansas State was ready for. And I'm going to sneak in one last thing about the Michigan game. As the last part of me just like waxing poetic about him, I'm so impressed by him. I'm so impressed by what he's been doing. And I think that instance, that last drive in regulation on Saturday it's not a blueprint, but it's something that I think you have to do against Michigan because you've been saving him for the whole season, been trying to keep him healthy and keep him back from doing that. You are now in a 1-game season. And if you win that one game, then you're in another 1-game season, right? You're not saving him for anything else. There's nothing left after this. You use all your options. You empty the clip. You give him the green light to say, you get to read 3, you don't see it, you scramble, you go, right? You give him the green line of like, we're going to run QB power. We're going to run the read option. Yep. We're going to run the inverted veer. We're going to use your legs and make the other team account for that, because that's the one aspect of the offense that I feel like has been there, but only in name all year. Yep. If they can make Michigan have to account for that on top of all the other stuff they've gotten so much better at all year, that they have to account for vintage Max Duggan on top of that, that unlocks the ability to do some special things. And that's one thing that I want to see Garrett give them the green light to do against Michigan.
Matt, that is a more nice things than any of our guests have said about Max Duggan. Parker, it is your turn. I'll open the floor to you.
I have cried twice in my life. Once when I was 7 and I was hit by a school bus. And then again, when I watched the Max Duggan Heisman highlight video narrated by Billy Bob Thornton portraying Gary Gaines from Friday Night Lights. Yeah, we're going to take a victory lap. This isn't it. That's great. And again, I was wrong. I literally have said, I don't think he'll ever win the Heisman. But I have long said that like Max Duggan, if you can't design an offense that wins with Max Duggan, you can't design an offense. And I was very vindicated here. I'll wax poetic. This is going to be old man yells at cloud for a minute, but bear with me. In an age where NFL draft projections and bowl opt-outs are dominating the headlines, Max Duggan is a refreshing reminder that college football is a game of stories and a game of individuals rising above what you think they can be, rising above their career earnings, rising above the preconceived notions and boxes into which you place them, and just playing football, God damn it. And that is what Max Duggan's doing this season, and you love to see it.
That sums it up.
He reminds me of, I was joking with some folks over the weekend. You know, there's the picture of him, getting emotional on the sideline after the loss. And I sent it to some folks and I was like, I'm going to tell my kids that this was Tim Tebow. Because it feels like he is, like we haven't had... No, but I mean that as like the highest possible compliment.
If Tim Tebow had a cannon.
If Tim Tebow had a cannon and was...
Sorry, hold on.
But
hold on. Sorry, Matt. No, I'm sorry. I'm breaking news right now. This is the important... As your former boss, you should respect this.
Okay.
Sonny Dykes just got named Coach of the Year. I just got the email.
That happened like 6 hours ago. What are you doing?
It was the Walter Camp one, and then I
just got the email from Mark Cohen.
Just now? Was it the Walter Camp one? Yeah, he got that one.
Well, Matt, okay. Well, that's why.
But no, he deserves it. He deserves it.
I thought we were breaking news.
No, it's fine. It's fine. And I think
everybody will really be shocked on Thursday morning when they hear this.
Oh, Jesus.
But no,
wait, Matt,
let me finish my point here for just a second.
Please do. Sorry.
But like when hear what Parker's saying about like the stories, right, and about the narratives and about rooting for the person and that kind of thing. Duggan is kind of made in that. It feels weird to call something from 2008 old school, but kind of old school mold of the quarterback of where he's the leader that the whole team rallies around. He's like super deferential through all the, and I don't think that necessarily makes him a better person or anything like that. I'm not bagging on anyone who is more of the swaggering or the flashy thing. I think all the TCU fans who are bagging on Caleb Williams this week, I think need to go like take a walk, right? Like relax. Like that's my thing. I think that's all misplaced aggression. But I do think it's just he is playing quarterback and kind of, representing himself in a way that's just like really uncommon these days.
Mm-hmm.
Not to say that that's better or worse. It's just like something that I haven't seen a quarterback that's in his position do in a hot minute. And that would, I'm not saying it makes him better than other folks or that like that's something that I'm like pining for, but it's cool to see because it really does come across as so genuine and so sincere. He does it in like the most earnest way. And it's just really fun to see a guy who really is, by all accounts, someone who wants to see his teammates succeed, wants to see them get their flowers before himself. To see him finally get this level of recognition, it's very, very cool. Is he going to win on Saturday? Almost certainly not. And that's fine, honestly. I was telling Grant, I think if he had scored a game winner in overtime and they had won, I think he would have locked it up for himself, honestly. I don't think that's going to happen now. But the fact that he got himself into that situation and now he's in the playoff with a chance to, he would tell you, achieve a goal that's more important.
Yep.
Very cool.
Yeah.
His best bet is that Stetson Bennett and Caleb Williams split the vote and he wins. And that's a real possibility. That's realer than I thought it was, for sure.
Yeah. I'll make a comparison real quick, and then we'll take us out here. He reminds me, this is my own biases, of Marcus Page, the point guard at North Carolina, who in 2016, when he anyway, that's my greatest comparison.
No one cares. Literally, no one cares about North Carolina.
Oh, I care about it, and I care about it. Damn it, Parker, Matt. This has been the Purple Theory Podcast. I'm Grant McGalliard. You can find me on Twitter at Grant McGalliard, spelled like it sounds with all those vowels. He's Parker Fleming. He is at Stats Award. The BetUS show airs noon Tuesday and Wednesday on YouTube. And Matt Jennings is at Matt Jennings on Twitter. You can also find him on Medium, where he is an essayist. Wait, did I get that wrong, Parker? What happened?
I thought he was Matt A. Jennings on Twitter.
Is it Matt A. Jennings? He is Matt A. Jennings. He is Matt A. Jennings on Twitter, where he is an essayist.
Matt the Kingmaker Jennings. Matt the Kingslayer Jennings.
And a bon vivant at Matt A. Jennings. Apologies to our guest. Thank you for joining us, Matt. I hope you're well. Everyone, go Frogs.
Go Frogs.
Go Frogs.